Hello, welcome back to Bethel Evangelical Free Church Hanley on YouTube. I'm Pastor Gervase Charmley. This is a video about a historic church in the Staffordshire Moorlands, the Church of St Mildred, Whiston. Now I say it's historic, it's just a little over 110 years old. Whiston was, until 1897, a part of the big moorland parish of Kingsley. Of course, moorland parishes, because the population was quite small and dispersed, they tend to be big parishes with not very big churches. And as population grew in the 19th century, there was more and more of a concern to provide churches like this for the people. Initially, the services at Whiston were held from the 1870s in the new school, which was built by the National School Society, which was an Anglican charity for providing education. But over time, of course, it was recognised they would need a new church. In the early 1890s, 1891 in fact, a chancel was added to the village school that could be closed off in the week, and then it would, of course, be opened up on Sundays as the church. But that was, again, a stopgap measure. They needed to have an actual church. Well, at the beginning of the 20th century, work really got going on providing a church. A gentleman from Leek, who owned land in the parish, provided a site, and it was initially thought, well, we're going to call it St Barnabas. That's quite a popular name in those days, Barnabas, the son of consolation. But there were still questions about getting building stone. Yes, there's some quarries in the neighbourhood, but stone costs money. Well, about the middle of the first decade of the 19th century, the old copper mill in the village closed down, and it was to be demolished. It was a big stone building, and it was to be pulled down, and the then clergyman, Mr. J.H. Dagger, came and said, well, could we have some of the stone to build a new church with? Because recycled stone would cost a great deal less than brand new stone. And so he was able to arrange to have a significant chunk of the copper mill, including several stone arches, to build his new church. And so that's what we've got here. We have a church built of recycled stone. It was named St Mildred's for an Anglo-Saxon saint, a woman saint, who was the abbess of Minster down in Kent. It's one of only a few churches in the country that's dedicated to her. And it was opened in 1910. And that's what we have here now. It's this 1910 building. It's been altered, particularly in terms of internal fittings have been added. The east window, we'll see that later, the stained glass window is about 1960. So we'll have a look around and see this little moorland church on the inside first of all. So as usual, we start at the west end. And you can see it's not a very long church. I've pretty much got my back to the west door here. In fact, I'll just back up until I do. Yes, I've got my back to the west door now. And this is the whole of the sanctuary, as it were. There is no distinction between nave and chancel. This arch you can see here is in fact you can see there, can't you? There's two arches, and in fact there's four arches. And these are all arches that come from the old copper mill. So the form of the building is partially dictated by the materials, and particularly these arches, that Mr. Dagger was able to obtain. We have, of course, the font, and this is a very simple little font. It's the kind you could basically buy in the day from a church furnishings company. In fact, there were catalogues where you could buy these things from. And that, again, helped to keep the cost down, because cost was important. Seating is in chairs these days. There were pews, but there was a need for this to be more flexible, and so these chairs are like they're 1970s. There was actually a big project here in 1971 to provide some extra facilities in addition to what was there before, and particularly, of course, in terms of vestry and toilets. So here we are. There's a historical display at the back here, and we've got here showing, you can see this is the materials being brought up from the old copper mill, and see all the chunks of stone, and then the building as it was when it was opened. A little bit about Minster Abbey, where St Mildred was. She was the second abbess of the abbey, but obviously what you can see there is not the Anglo-Saxon buildings really, but later medieval. And this then relates to when they extended the building in the 1970s, 1971, when they put a new nose on. Now originally it was supposed to look like this: 5 bays, 4 full-size bays and 1 short one at the east end, with this big heavy bell turret and this big porch. Never built. You can see here the photographs show that what they had was a little wooden porch on the outside. And when we get to the east end, we'll look back and see the issue with the wall. You can see here just a close-up of this stone, how it's cracked and scored. And as we look around, you can see some of it is discoloured, it's different colours, and it's not that it's different types of stone, it's that it's recycled stone, and some of it has obviously been in areas where it's got soot on it and it hasn't all been scrubbed off. We've got a chancel screen, that's quite normal for the period. No pulpit, although there is that little lectern thing that is attached to the screen. I'm not sure they use it very much these days. I know I wouldn't, but that's another matter. So we move forward through the screen. You'll see the organ there, that's installed in 1925, because first of all you raise the money for the church, then you raise the money for the organ. Lectern in the middle there, and we've got these grab rails. That's because there's a step, and you see it's painted white to make it easier to see, and people who are less steady on their feet, you can just grab the rail and pull yourself up. Very, very useful, very helpful. Would that more people understood the need of those who are less mobile. Organ is 2 manual with pedal board, and it has a maker's name of W.H. Rogers and Sons, Stoke-on-Trent. It was initially, as was normal, blown manually. That is to say, there would be a little boy or a little girl would be pumping the organ. But in 1939, they have an electric blower installed. East window, we have Christ the Good Shepherd with the 4 evangelists, with their various symbols, emblems, and this is 1960, so mid-20th century. It's the only stained glass here, and it's a memorial to members of the Keane family. No carved reredos, just a damask curtain, really. And there was supposed to be a vestry, but again, that was never built. And so, back up here, we look very simple, very small, just those 2 bays of the nave, and again we've got these stone arches. And as we go back to the, well, first of all there's the sort of pseudo pulpit, and a bit of a squeeze to get in there. The minister has to stand still. I suspect it's really just used for readings these days. But you can see here there is an arch, a blocked up arch in the west wall. And that's because they were going to add that extra western bay at some point. But of course, 1910, you've then got, so we're raising money for the bay, the Great War happens. All the money that you've raised, inflation means it's worth a great deal less than it was, and you've got bigger problems than building an extra bay to your church and making it look posher. So 1910 through to 1971, the church just ends outside as well as inside with that blocked arch. So go back again to the west end. See, we've got the usual hymn books, prayer books there. Book of Common Prayer. Good idea. And again, this rather uneven coloration of the stone, because it's recycling, you use what you can. And the west wall in particular, that's just a temporary bit of stone, and it's going to all be taken out, and that never happened. So we'll have a look first of all at the 1970s extension. Now this is further altered and improved in 2011 as kind of a centenary. You can just hear the echo here, because of course what we've got in here, we've got the toilet, very important. We've got the vestry, also very important, and we've got the kitchen area. So you could have your kitchen type stuff. You've got a sink. Provisions, obviously it's not a full kitchen for cooking, it's facilities for tea, coffee, light refreshments. And that again is important, and it's a reminder that things change. What's necessary, what's needed in a church changes over time. So the 1970s extension was sufficient in the 1970s for what was seen as necessary then. But what's seen as necessary now is more than that. The echo here is because there's a wonderful tiled floor, which is quite nice. There we are down there. So that's the inside here, and you can see there's the door, and it's all actually very well done in here. But this bit is rebuilt in 2011 just to provide a decent provision for refreshments, toilets, that sort of thing. So we'll go outside and have a look around there. So here we have outside here at St Mildred's, Whiston, and you can see this sort of nose added on the front, 1871, and then or 1971 rather, extended in 2011. That this nose here is much simpler and plainer than the original planned West End. As we have a look around, we'll see that it does have this kind of unfinished look, and certainly it did until they put this front end on, and the front and the back contrast quite notably. So let's have a look around the outside. This is of course all local stone, nice sort of reddish stone. And as we move around, see it's across there. I have to apologise for the wind noise. It's obviously we're on a hillside, so of course we get a bit of wind. And so here we are around the outside, and you immediately see that what they've done with the bell is definitely the bell here. So they've done a little bell turret here in the corner rather than the big bell turret that was originally intended. And as we move around further, this lovely recycled stone from the old copper mill. It's a really good idea. We've got the building being knocked down in the area, that stone building, so why not? That's the old school. Of course that's now a house, and as often happened in these villages, you've had this situation where just because people have changed and what's needed has changed and the population has changed, we don't have the village school anymore. And you've got to be careful because this is of course still a working graveyard, still a working church. You see there these whacking great buttresses that really give the building some presence, and of course they're connected to those big arches from the old copper mill. So let's back up this way a bit, just try and get a side view in a sort of respectful manner, because we do have to be respectful. So there we have it, and it's a muscular building. It's this early 20th century a bit of arts and crafts, and quite a muscular structure, building that really projects itself. And of course up in the moorlands you want something that has a bit of presence to it like that. Got your leaded paned windows, and again that little bell turret. And again you can see here that there is no division between nave and chancel, not structurally, because you've got those four big arches that form the goes hawthorn timber, that form the structure of the building. And yes, that is a Methodist chapel up there. So see the Methodists and the Anglicans, they're literally stone's throw from each other. I'm sure they get on quite well these days, though. I'm sure they're not throwing stones at one another. That would be, well, whatever your view on these things, it would be a bad witness. So here we have it, the East End, and you have the cornerstone up here. To the great glory of God, the cornerstone of this church of St Mildred was laid by Lieutenant Colonel Roland John Beach, D.L. J.P., October the 2nd, 1909. And so that tells us that that's when this bit was built. And you can see here you've got this little bay of the chancel, and then the other bays are a bit bigger, not much bigger though. And here you've got this discontinuity in the stonework in that second bay from the east, and that's where the vestry was supposed to be, and that's why you've also got that little window up there, but it's never built. But because what they then did was they said, well, we're going to build we're going to put the organ in there instead, well, there's no point in opening up that window. So it's very much this unfinished feel. You can see there, you've got the bit at the west end, and these wings have been added, of course, the vestry and toilet wings. So that is that. Now, again, there's the Methodists and the old school. So this is right next to the old school, which is a really good location to be because it's right at the middle, well, as far as there's the middle of this village. So that's St Mildred's, Kingsley, just a little bit over 110 years old. So I'll say a few closing words and then that'll be that. And so there you have it, St Mildred's, Kingsley. It's a lovely building. I do love this little part of the Staffordshire Moorlands with this little church. Maybe something, no, that's all right. This little church and this little chapel. And it's a great example, this building, as I said, of recycling. We need a church, we haven't got a lot of money, and so Mr. Dagger, clever man that he was, goes around and manages to find this copper mill being pulled down, and from copper mill to church, just move the stones around a bit. Well, thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I've enjoyed making it, and until next time, may God bless you and keep you.